everybody. Thank you so much for that. That was a great introduction, Dan. And Skip, so glad to be with you.
Oh my gosh, this is my great honor.
You know, Skip and I go like back to when I was Attorney General. He ran the Consumer Protection Division in the Attorney General's office. So I don't know how many years that's been, but like probably close to 20.
Yeah. And it was the highlight of my career, absolutely, to work for you, particularly when it came to energy. So Dan just stole some of the initial thunder here, because what I wanted to ask you was, you know, and what I think everybody wants to know, what are you doing now? And particularly with regard to energy issues and the American Jobs Project, because we worked a little bit on that, and that's a very, very cool project that you're doing out of Berkeley.
Yeah. So
they're doing the really good stuff out of Stanford, but you did some stuff out of Berkeley.
Yeah. We don't like Stanford at Berkeley. So I'm in California now, and just for those of you who don't know, Dan and I, and Dan is right here in the front row, and we moved to California to be near my family because my dad has had a couple of strokes and is very fragile, and my brother could not be in the vicinity. So it's nice for us to be near them, although we desperately miss Michigan. And so this weekend we went again running along the lake. It's just so fantastic. You guys all should know, even though we live in California and people say, oh, California, so you just live in this most magical place. Don't ever think that this isn't God's country and that you are not in the most magical place in the country, because you are. So that little thing aside, I am at Berkeley, and one of the things I'm doing is teaching classes in renewable energy, but also running this American Jobs Project. And the American Jobs Project is really a way to focus on energy as job creation state by state. And so to go to the red states and say, we don't even use the words climate change in this project. It is purely an economic play. It's all about job creation. And what we say is, if you just look at the projections for growth in this sector, in wind and solar and battery, et cetera, and if you're a business person wearing your green eye shades, you would say, of course we should be getting a piece of that economic action in our state if we want to employ people. And so we, using the DOE projections, they have a JEDI model which projects how you can grow jobs in a particular area, and it's actually a 13 state right now, university-led partners in 13 different states, university partners, to say to their legislature in all those states, here's what you can do to be the go-to state in various sectors of the clean energy realm that you could be successful in. So doing sort of a comparative analysis of what would be their strengths, and in partnership locally, because you certainly can't have Berkeley going to, say, Georgia and saying this is what you should do. You got to have Georgia Tech as your partner and say, here is what your local industry should do. So in Atlanta, they've got a huge energy efficient building sector, for example, and they are creating all sorts of jobs around that. So it's a way to recommend policies to create jobs in the fastest growing sector on the planet.
So let's jump right into the energy transition. Traverse City is a 100% clean electricity city now.
Woo!
Thank you. Thank you, all of those folks who worked on this, Kate Madigan and Groundwork, and Mayor Carruthers, who was so receptive to this concept. Pardon me?
That's the goal.
That's the goal.
The stated goal is 100%.
Right, yes,
right,
yes.
Right.
Yes, yeah.
Have the goal first and then actions.
And I saw just yesterday that Sierra Club, by their count, there are 118 mayors in the United States that want to have the same goal of 100% renewable energy.
Oh, it's okay. I was going to say, I know there are 300 that have said we're in on Paris, but obviously 100% is even a further reach goal than that. So
this is where I'm going. So with state leadership, there are governors that are coming forward. We have all of this renewable energy, particularly utility scale wind projects being built in red states. We have mayors working together, sharing information, understanding best practices and policy to push this. So what do you think about the fact that we withdrew from the Paris Climate Agreement and we terminated the Clean clean energy plan or clean power plan. So how much does that push us back?
I don't think it's going to I think you're going to see a huge, I mean, you're seeing 300 mayors already saying we're still in. You're seeing a whole slew of states saying we're still in. While it's embarrassing that we don't have national leadership, global leadership in this. I don't think that the United States, though, that those who are doing work certainly at the mayoral level all across the country are not going to set us back. In fact, there are thousands of companies who have also said we are still in as well. So between the local level and the private sector, I think that the U.S. will continue to move forward. My fear is, though, that you will see China and India and other places decide that they're going to take the global lead on clean energy, and that will cause us to miss an opportunity in job creation in addition to leadership on climate. So I'm obviously profoundly disappointed about us getting out, but I don't think it's the end of the story, and I do think that there is another opportunity, and I know this is obviously a bipartisan crowd, and I totally respect that, but regardless of your party, if you're here, you care about us having leadership in clean energy, and you have a chance to fix that in 2020.
Yeah, so go ahead. So, you know, in light of all this, I for a while have thought that maybe the prime mover here, there are multiple forces that are pushing us to a clean energy future and decarbonating the global economy, but maybe first among them is the business community response. We have, Apple, Google, Facebook, Whole Foods, Intel, Kohl's, the list goes on and on. More than half of the Fortune 100, nearly half of the Fortune 500, all indicating a clear preference for clean energy resources. So my question is, you're a politician, you have been a politician. Why aren't legislatures and Congress more responsive to this clear declaration by the business community that their preference is for clean energy?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there are obviously forces on the other side that are very powerful, that are causing the desire among many in the business community to move toward clean energy to slow that train. However, I will say this. I think that when Google comes to Michigan and says, hey, we will put one of our data centers in your state, but in exchange, we want you to raise your renewable portfolio standard, and we don't want to just have to buy clean energy credits from somewhere else. We want you to be generating that energy. That is really powerful. It's true with, all of these guys, Facebook and Apple and Google, and they're all now demanding of states in exchange for putting their data centers there and to create jobs, they are demanding this. And I think this is only going to ratchet up further. When you see, especially because, we know in Michigan we've had a brain drain issue, right? And you want to create a state that is attractive for our millennials and their children to come and to stay, right? If you are a state that looks like you are a resistant, Luddite, backward state, then those young people are not going to come and stay, right? So just from a purely, hey, are we going to be an inviting state? Are we going to be an attractive, a magnet? Or are we going to be a repellent? That the business community, like in the tech community, can be really helpful in getting legislatures to up the game with respect to renewables, et cetera. It's just so obvious that clean energy is less expensive now than fossil fuel energy. And those numbers continue, so the numbers continue to drop, and therefore the installations and the demand for clean energy continue to rise. All right, so this declining cost, right? I mean, I think that if you are the CFO of a company, and you're saying, where are we going on this? You're going to say, I'm going to go for not just to use in your company the cheapest power, but to potentially think about diversifying into creating jobs in this area, because you see the numbers going down, and the blue line is the demand going up. So cost and demand, you always see this U curve. This is solar. I mean, it's been a dramatic decline in solar power costs. And you guys were just saying, that you're installing in Leelanau, where are you, for $1, how much? $1.50 a watt. I mean, that's incredibly cheap. It's amazingly cheap. I mean, it's so much cheaper than coal. And, you know, how much money is Michigan sending out by purchasing coal?
24 billion, or no, fossil fuels. Most of that is transportation, but 24 billion a year.
I mean,
24 billion a year. That's what we expend,
insane.
dollars we send out of the state to purchase fossil fuel.
So if the costs are coming down and the demand side is going up, and this is on batteries, and this is another place where we were working so hard to get the battery industry, because we built car 1.0, we want to build car 2.0. Those triangles are the projected cost drops in battery, and this slide was from 2016, and that continues to go down, and of course the uptake in batteries, and that goes toward the electric vehicle, and we'll have a little bit of a discussion about that. My only point in showing you that is that it's so obvious now that there is no other rational thought in terms of moving in this direction. The only barriers, it seems, are barriers related to irrational things like, you know, the Koch brothers.
So I got to work with this person closely for a number of years. How lucky am I? So, a couple of things, just going back a bit. So Google did write that letter to the legislative quadrant and to the governor of this state, and it was co-signed by 12 other corporations that essentially said, we have a preference now for zero carbon energy resources, and in fact, we'll be making future investment decisions based upon the availability of clean energy resources, and you need to take that into account. This was prior to the last iteration of the legislation that resulted in lifting the RPS, when the legislation was actually going to abolish it. So they intervened to do that, and then the other thing was Switch. Switch is coming to Grand Rapids, and they say they're making a $5 billion investment, which, if it does total $5 billion, will be by far the largest investment in Michigan's history, but if and only if they could have 100% clean energy. So it is changing.
Yeah, it is totally changing. Isn't that, I mean, it's so great. So the private sector leadership feels this responsibility now to step up in terms of asking the public sector to bend to their desires to have zero. And so the next step for them, Skip, you're aware that I've been really championing this idea that the private sector should lob a challenge to governors, like the Race to the Top for education, which was $3.4 billion. So Bill Gates has now got $50 billion committed to clean energy technology, and that's great. But some of it has to go to deployment, is my argument. And if he just sliced off a little bit of that and said to the governors, the Gates challenge, and here is the challenge. In order for you to access some of these dollars, you've got to raise your renewable portfolio standard, take people from where they are to some much more significant percentage, or, list the things you would like. But to me, this is the next step for the private sector, is to do a bigger challenge, but make it to the governors. And if it's a private sector challenge, in the Race to the Top for education, 48 states raised their high school standards in response to that little carrot that the federal government put out. 48 states, including Michigan. The two states that didn't were Texas and South Carolina, just so in case you're wondering. But if the private sector lobbed a challenge to the governors, all 50 states, I am sure, would, despite the Koch brothers, would, come to the fore.
Yeah, well, you've been talking about this for a long time, and I think it will happen, but it should have happened already. It should have happened already. So, boy, there's so much we can talk about. As another sort of forcing function moving us to a clean energy future, I want to ask you a question about divestment, but first a preliminary question. Weren't you involved in the Harvard divestment movement on apartheid and whatnot? You were the editor-in-chief of the Harvard Law Review for Civil Rights and Civil
Liberties Law Review, yeah. Yeah, I was. And in fact, Dan and I recorded around me sitting in front of the president of Harvard's office protesting, "Derek Bach, get the word, this is not Johannesburg." So yeah, it was about divesting Harvard's investments in
So you're the
companies.
expert I'm looking for. So we have this really quickly growing, some say the fastest growing divestment movement in the world. We have the Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund, the largest fund in the world, capitalized at almost $1 trillion, that is getting out of fossil fuels. Sweden just announced the AP7, your partly Swedish fund, is getting out of fossil fuels. The California State Employees Pension Fund is getting out of fossil fuels. So my question is, how impactful is that?
I think it's huge. I mean, it's another push, like the private sector push. You know, you have enough of these, and they build up enough, then you will see the dominoes start to fall. And I think, especially in the regions of the country where there really is still significant resistance. And I think we all have to recognize that if our DNA in Michigan were out of coal mines, you would be feeling for the people who would be losing their jobs, right? When they attack the auto industry, that hurts us. So we have to be cognizant of that. But what we haven't done as a nation is to develop the means for people in transition to thrive. And it's that transition, giving people the notion, I mean, why not in West Virginia say to those who are in coal mines that have shut down, or not just in West Virginia, but anywhere, hey, there is huge amount of need for solar panel installers, for example. Why wouldn't you move to energy in a different way that still allowed people to make a good paying middle class living? And it's that piece, I think, that the US has fallen down on, really not from a national perspective. I mean, we've done it in pockets in Michigan, but from a national perspective, I think that has caused enormous resistance. But I do think all of these things, whether it's the private sector demanding renewable portfolio standards, or these pension funds demanding that they divest, or people demanding that pension funds divest, all of that pressure is very good. And let me just say one other thing. We were talking about this. How many of you guys went to the movie last night and were at the talk? So we started this talk about autonomous vehicles. One of the things that's in the study that we referred to, it's called Rethink, is the name of the study that Tony Seba is on. But one of the things he talks about in that is that if, in fact, this tipping point into electric autonomous vehicles happens, that the oil industry is going to collapse. Oil right now is about $50 a barrel. There will be a peak oil demand period in about 2020. If this study is accurate, and in the between 2020 and 2030, the price per barrel will drop to about $25. This will kill the oil industry. So my point on saying that is that market forces are having a significant impact on coal, as we've seen. They are going to continue to have a significant impact on oil and even on natural gas. And I think we will get to a point where natural gas is where we will have baseload plants on renewables, and natural gas will be the filler, rather than having a natural gas plant with renewables as the filler.
Yeah, so you can't understate how important that is. Bloomberg and Navigant and the Grantham Institute in the UK also have done analyses on declining demand for transportation fuels and the effect that will have on transportation fuel prices. And all three of them sort of have come out independently in the same place. Not as aggressive as Tony Seba, but indicating that EV penetration, because we're at an inflection point, will be such by 2023 that US may be using 2 million barrels a day of transportation fuels less. And if that happened, that's price pressure on, yeah, huge. And we've already seen in the last 6 months, ExxonMobil, Conoco, and Royal Dutch Shell essentially write off their investments in Albertan tar sands. And we have to keep that heavy carbon stuff in the ground, and it's happening.
Yeah, and they are seeing the writing on the wall too. They wanted us to stay in Paris because they're now investing huge amount in biofuels and in other options for energy. So that's good. They should be seeing that. Our auto industry should be seeing where things are going and invest more in the electrification of our transportation system. We just do not want to be left behind. And you don't want, I mean, Dan and I live near Silicon Valley. You do not want them to win. You want to have Michigan winning this.
Yeah.
Pardon me? Subsidizing what? Oh, I know. Well, don't ask me. You know why. It's back to my old answer.
Well, in part, the reason is those subsidies, some of which have existed for 100 years for oil, are embedded in the tax code, and Congress has to affirmatively act to end those subsidies, where renewable energy is in an entirely different place. Congress provides temporary incentives for subsidies. Subsidies are important. You know, they're theoretically designed to get innovative technology to market, and then theoretically they're supposed to end. That hasn't happened for the fossil fuel industry and needs to.
And I'm going to say something controversial here. But
really?
I think that, honestly, that once the tax credits for renewables end, I think you'll see a movement to get rid of all subsidies on both sides. And I think head to head, bring it on, because I think the renewables can compete and win.
Okay, and on that, riffing off that, if we actually, I'm a Republican in this area. I'm going to be controversial as well. I think we need to do robust, full cost-benefit analysis on certain energy policy. We absolutely have to do that. And that would entail monetizing, quantifying the impact of health and to the health and human health and the environment of fossil fuel combustion. And if we did that, if those costs were included, like economists of every stripe suggest we should include those costs because they're part of production, then it's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
I mean, we would be adding 10 cents to the cost of electricity. Some studies say 20 cents.
Yeah.
So.
No doubt. I mean, levelized cost of energy should take all of that in, but it doesn't at the moment.
It doesn't. So, should we take another question?
Okay, holler. No, I think that there's somebody with a mic.
If you could address the jobs in America for Michigan, that would be great.
Yeah, right now there are between 90 and 102,000 people who are currently employed in some aspect of clean energy in Michigan. And I want to Google it, but our American Jobs Project suggested that Michigan continue to further its expertise both in the smart and efficient building realm, because you've got a lot of manufacturers of that, and in solar. And if you had the right policy pieces in place to continue to create both supply and demand of that, I want to say you could create another 120,000 jobs in that area, but I want to Google it and make sure that I have the number right. Bottom line is, those are two areas in addition to what you've already got in Michigan that I think we could really excel at. I would also add batteries, to continue to push on the battery side, because obviously, since transportation is our baby.
And
one of the things is to, this report on Michigan was done right before your December upping of the RPS. But what we were suggesting is decoupling. I think that if there were a way to get the legislature to give the power clearly to the PSC to do decoupling, that would be very, very helpful in that regard. On financing on your bill would be another way of easily seeing deployment happen. I don't know that you guys are doing that at the moment on bill financing or permitting.
We do. Holland, I think, the municipal utility may be doing it already, and other municipal utilities, I think, are able to do that. But we do need on-bill financing. Mary Powell spoke to that this morning.
Right. Well, to check out AmericanJobsProject.us and just click on Michigan, and it's got a list of like 15 different policies that would be significant enhancements.
But Jennifer, given our legacy strengths in research and development of vehicles and advanced materials and our engineering prowess and all of that, what does that mean for this? You spoke to this yesterday, but what does that mean to the opportunity for autonomous vehicles and mobility for Michigan?
I was surprised that Michigan had done this, had passed this legislation which essentially approved autonomous vehicles. I mean, right now, the only place in the country, before and I didn't even know that, was Pittsburgh is doing a whole autonomous vehicle experiment. And people in Silicon Valley were looking to Pittsburgh. So I don't know that you've seen autonomous vehicles on your streets yet. I don't know that it's actually happened here yet. But with that testing facility that is at Willow Run, right near Willow Run, isn't it? Isn't that what he said yesterday?
Where is it?
Right? Yeah, I think that you have a huge opportunity, obviously, to do that. Because General Motors has invested this $500 million in Lyft, because Ford is in discussions, I think, with Uber, or no, they've got another company that they have invested in. Unfortunately, Chrysler has not, seems to be a bit slow on the uptake on both electrification and on autonomy. But I'm telling you, this is such a big deal. And if you'd had a city in Michigan that was willing to be the poster city where people are not just on a test track, but are actually those autonomous vehicles, initially there'll be somebody in the car, so don't worry, but that they're actually, making their way around. It puts Michigan out front. Michigan is often viewed as a state that is highly regulated, and that is not the place where you would put your first dollar if you were a technology company. And so the technology companies are seeing our big three as sort of old world, industrial companies rather than technology companies, which is an old world idea for them. They should realize how much technology is in a vehicle. But this really is a platform, a technology platform play. And so the combination of old and new makes you irresistible. And that's, I think, really exciting for you all.
So I want to go to one more area before we go to questions, okay? Because, at the risk of wonking out the audience, but how many of you are familiar with Mark Jacobson, the rock star 100% renewable energy? A lot of you are. Okay, so Mark Jacobson is at Stanford, and he has something called the Solutions Project. And he has online clean energy solutions for every state. He believes that we can power 100% of transportation, electricity, industrial processes with wind, water, and the sun. And he's done a lot of work in that area. He is a rock star. He's on TV a lot. But some colleagues of you, some highly respected scientists, just authored a paper and criticized him for his lack of modeling and making some other mistakes.
Tell us what you really think.
Yeah. So thoughts on that?
Well, here's what I don't really want to get into the argument about how many academics can battle on the head of a pin, but I do think that we, and I plead guilty about this because I'm so enthusiastic about renewables that I have to watch to make sure I don't overstate, because you don't want to end up hurting your case by being overly optimistic, especially in a given time frame. And that, this is why I mentioned this Tony Seba study is really quite revolutionary, and it's his words, not mine. But I think we do ourselves a disservice if we don't take into account realities. And I think the criticism about his stuff was mostly about his assumptions and time frames. Not that those technologies aren't really important and really can take up a huge swath, but the 100% I think is a wonderful goal, but how absolutely realistic is it in the time frame, he says, I think was really the challenge.
So
I'd be curious to know what you who was... Oh, so he's doing a lot of utility scale solar and wind
Right.
as opposed to distributed.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm with you on this because I think the takeaway, or what should be the main takeaway on this, is that they don't disagree that much. I mean, this criticism is suggesting that 80%, we can do 80%, but it's going to be tough, and that last 20% is going to be extremely difficult without everything being on the table. Okay, if that's where the debate has moved today, that's great.
Yeah, I agree with you on that.
Yeah.
I agree with you on that.
So, shall we take questions?
Yeah, sure. Well, wait, she's bringing a mic to you. She's bringing a...
Well, first of all, I want to say that Michigan State University, I believe, was the first public university to divest from apartheid South Africa. So,
Yay!
so we are working currently on trying to get Line 5 closed before it ruptures. And I know that many people here think that the whole question of the processes of government and the corporations will work. But we are really worried that the fall in the oil prices, for example, will keep Enbridge from doing the right thing. They will continue to try to upgrade Line 5 in the Straits to the point where they can't, and well, they can't now anyway, but the point where it will break. And what we're trying to figure out is how do you work the corporations doing the right thing, which they, by the way, are in Canada. They are, in fact, investing in solar and wind and geothermal in Canada. But they continue to want to put this aged pipeline through the Straits of Michigan, which it does indeed immediately endanger. And so I guess I'm asking, how do we get the right levers at the right time so all the work of all these people can actually go forward without the destruction of the Great Lakes?
Is it raining?
That's rain? I think I have my windows open. And I'm driving you back to the hotel.
Oh, no. I do think that political pressure is really powerful. And you guys are going to be having a gubernatorial election next year, and I think getting people on the record for what they would do about it, and that's true with members of the legislature as well. I don't know how, I don't know exactly legally, and you probably have a better shot about you have a better idea about what legally can be done, but getting people on the record and pressuring and showing up at town halls is, you're doing all of that, right? I just think that's the most effective and powerful tool, because if you can't, hopefully the company continues, to do or does the right thing, but I think your impact, because the company's not going to respond to you so much. It's going to be the political. No? Yeah. You don't want to wait till
Well, this
next year.
has to be a 2018 election issue, but right. I mean, we are we are living with this notion that a 63-year-old pipeline can operate indefinitely without accident in one of the most critical places, in the middle of this globally unique resource that we're all dependent on in so many ways. So, so we have to keep the pressure up on this. And we have the Attorney General who has said that this pipeline shouldn't and couldn't be built today. So that just strongly suggests to me that it needs to be shut down now, right? If you wouldn't and couldn't build it today because it's improperly placed, then why are we operating it? Anyway.
Right. Who's?
Keys are in it. Yeah.
The keys are in. See, this is what I love about northern Michigan. The windows are
Green
open and
Honda
the keys are in
CR-V
the car.
Parked way to the left.
We have a question out here.
Thank you.
It's just my seat, right?
Can I ask a question back here?
Jim.
Two things. One, your comment on the Mark Jacobson paper. We almost had Christopher Clack here, who is the author of the paper you were referring to. We almost had him at this conference. We had him all lined up, but it was kind of a last-minute thing. We couldn't fit him in. But I'm hoping the next time we have this conference, we can get him here because he's a really smart guy. And he's got a team of 20 scientists that went through all this.
And he believes too, like Dan Kamen and some of the others on there. I mean, these are people who believe strongly in a clean energy future.
Oh yeah, I mean,
absolutely.
I don't think the final decision is very far off at all. It's 80% versus 100% kind of thing. This is a question I wanted to ask last night, getting back to the EV space for a minute. And I wanted to get both of your opinions on this fact that the market cap of Tesla is today $4 billion more than BMW, 11 billion more than General Motors, 18 billion more than Ford. Why do you think that is?
Well, you drive a Tesla. You know how beautiful it is, right? But I mean, here's what I would say is that the investment community, first of all, loves Elon Musk and thinks he cannot do wrong. But there's a reason for that, and he has been so visionary about linking battery, right? He's doing the Gigafactory in Nevada. That Gigafactory is going to be running on 100% solar. That's the solar panels he's using are from Solar City. He owns Solar City as well, or he's head of Solar City as well. That combination of making now, and the batteries that he's going to be making for the vehicles, actually that Gigafactory is going to be making utility scale battery storage. And so he is looking at all of these trends where the battery, you know, the Tesla battery itself for the car is going to be a little piece of a much bigger play. And they're going to be selling you solar panels that have batteries attached to them on the back, right? So it's going to be a seamless system. So you will be able to store energy and use. So for all of those community solar panels that you bought, those are, I mean, he's really quite ingenious. And on top of that, Tesla is investing enormously in this autonomous technology, the vehicle operating system platform that will be autonomous. So electric, autonomous, solar, he has got the whole thing, and I think that's what investors are looking at. That you should ask the legislature of. Why can't you buy a Tesla in Michigan? It is because I think there is some threat from the part of the big three, huh? Right, I mean, no, they see it as a threat, so you have to go across the line, which is another reason why I can say, honestly, that's one of the reasons why some in Silicon Valley view Michigan as being a bit Luddite, because you can't even buy a Tesla in the state, which is really a shame, right? But you can buy a beautiful Bolt, and you might be able to get it as soon as September.
Right.
And they're fantastic.
Gina's had her hand up for a while.
Hi. So we heard some good things about what Michigan State has done. I just want to throw this out there. I just read that University of Michigan, starting in September, will have a bus that's autonomous.
Awesome.
Driving kids around Central Campus. One, and it has a babysitter, but it's out there, so yay.
Yay.
All right.
Now, if it's autonomous and electric, that's really great.
So touching back on the Enbridge question, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for crafting the Great Lakes Water Compact. And my question is, in this national discussion of devolving regulations back to the state under the current administration, how scared do we need to be about protecting the Great Lakes? I know this is off topic slightly, but I think as one of the original protagonists for protecting the Great Lakes, you might have an opinion about that.
Yeah, I of course, I'm worried about it. I mean, of course, because there's nothing that you can predict with this administration with certainty. I do know that, fortunately, the senators, Republicans and Democrats, in all of the Great Lakes states are united. And, you know, Trump won Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania in order to win. the presidency. If those senators and those members of Congress continue to be strong in protecting the Great Lakes, one only hopes that politically he would see the benefit of listening. But, you know, I share your worry, and all I can say is turn it around in 2020.
Hello? Hello? Hi.
Are we,
Back over here. This probably has to be the last
okay,
question.
last question.
So thank you so much for your presentation. I think all of us in this room are on the same page as you, is wanting to move renewable energy forward. But I think an important process of getting the political will is make sure that we don't diss the other side. That say we do this for all Americans, for red states or blue states. And it is a real risk to the economy, I think, is what the oil people are thinking. When all the big oil company stocks implode and drop down, there can be a lot of economic dislocation. So I think one thing, if we want to move this forward, is start in your university work. How do we have a transition plan? How do we have some kind of buyout or more careful bring down of the value of the stranded assets so that all sides can be in favor? I think why the oil companies want to keep going is because they're afraid legitimately of what could happen to our entire economy if the price of all these stocks, dropped to zero. So I'm hoping that as leaders, and especially in the university system, that one of the things you can say we are working toward is a transition plan, saying this is happening, we want to happen for all the states and for all the people, and try to close a divide that will be better for everyone's health and welfare and well-being. Thanks.
A couple of quick things.
You've been cut off.
Wood Mackenzie just came out with a report this week predicting a transition of fossil fuel companies to zero carbon and renewable energy sources. Royal Dutch Shell had investments in clean energy technology, terminated those investments, sold them off, but given what is happening, we're going to see a renaissance. At least this consultancy is predicting a renaissance in fossil fuel company reinvestment in renewable energy technologies because it's trending so strong. The other thing, I would just say, we have 33 years to make this transition. It is going to be incremental. Infrastructure needs to be replaced. It wears out. We just need to make prudent investments with reference to the future, where we want to be, and and what is going to work and what isn't.
I want to say, though, I thank you for raising this issue. It is easy to be in a bubble, right, of people who all understand and see the future and not recognize the pain that will ripple across by the elimination or degradation of fossil fuel industries. We have got to, and this has to be at the federal level as well as at the state level, devise just transition plans for people, have a strategy for people that allows them to transition in a just way. So I thank you for raising it because it is a really important question, and it's a great thing to close on, to keep reminding us that it's about all of us and not just about those of us who think like we do, right? All right, one more.
Thank you. It's sort of related. I feel like everything we talk about may not have the relevance to people who, and like 40% of the people in our region, who really are struggling to get the next meal on the table. How can we have this be relevant to people who are experiencing real financial need?
I think this is sort of the tipping point kind of question. When the cost curve is below what they're currently paying, that's when it starts to become relevant for people, right? I was saying last night that if you believe these studies about autonomous electric vehicles and you're currently paying 65 cents per mile and you have the opportunity to pay 16 cents per mile, that's a tipping point strategy, and that will hugely benefit people people who are paycheck to paycheck. In fact, you will see huge mobility opportunities for people who don't currently have them, who can't afford to buy a car, and who would then be able to be transported in a much cheaper way. That, to me, is the tipping point. That's when it will become real for them. I think on the vehicle side, it'll become realer much quicker, even almost, than it has been on this side, because the costs haven't gone below the price of coal, fossil fuel, electricity. Now they have, and so now I think you'll start to see it. But it's that upfront cost of installing solar panels that's a barrier for people. So figuring out how to amortize and allow people to do PACE financing or whatever that gets them the ability to install first, that's when it becomes relevant. I want to say thank you to you all for caring so deeply about this, about our collective future, and for being so loving for our great state of Michigan. It is wonderful to be home. Thank you so much, and thanks to you, Skip.